Good morning and welcome to all the participants of this virtual Manufacturing Indaba, and a special word of welcome to our panel members from all over the world, and also a special thanks to Oracle, which is our session sponsor. We'll just go to meet Eric right now. In terms of the session content, we've spoken a lot about manufacturing, and the contribution of the manufacturing sector to South Africa's gross domestic product has continued to shrink. And currently, this is in 2019, it contributes approximately 11.9% of our gross domestic product. So despite the relative growth in other sectors in the economy, manufacturing remains very important. I think this is a factor often mentioned, but some of the following factors underlying the importance of manufacturing is the ability to create local employment and value addition, the ability to participate in global manufacturing value chains, and thereby enabling expanded market access and also generation of foreign revenue. Thirdly, manufacturing is known for creating spillover effects. That's benefits for related and unrelated sectors in the economy. And what we've also know about manufacturing is that it creates and renews clusters of skills, of supply chains and services. So to conclude, besides the special value addition, there's a large cross-cutting enabling contribution of manufacturing. So we then continually talk about how to improve manufacturing. And some of the proposed improvements of the manufacturing sector was concretized in the concept of Industry 4.0, which was introduced in Germany in around 2011. Soon after that, it almost became a household name in the form of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And as a number of us know, or most people know, it has almost created its own hype cycle, if you go to that. So if you talk Fourth Industrial Revolution, there's a number of key enablers or key enabling technologies. And for example, there are various definitions of that, but some of the main ones are artificial intelligence, blockchain technologies, 3D printing or additive manufacturing, the Internet of Things and systems, and robotics. So during today's discussion, we'll take a deep dive into one of those areas, and that is specifically the role and value of artificial intelligence in manufacturing, and specifically within the context of COVID and the post-COVID world. Obviously, AI don't stand alone. It stands in context with the other enabling technologies. So we will also refer to that, but mainly we will focus on AI. To lead you and to guide you in this discussion, I would like to welcome the respective panel members. From Oracle, our main sponsor for this session is Mr. Eric Prevost. He is from Lyon in France, and he's the Vice President for Discrete Manufacturing and Industry 4.0, and also the Oracle Industry Strategy Group. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
From SAP in Atlanta, Mr. Mike Lackey, who is the Global Vice President of Solution Management and Digital Manufacturing. Welcome, Mike.
Well, thank you very much. Great to be here.
And then from Sasol, Mr. Oratile Sematle. He is the head of Sasol's digital program. And then from CISPRO Solutions, Ms. Deirdre Fryer, who is the head of solutions engineering. And then from the Tecnológico de Monterrey, Mexico, Professor David Romero, who is the professor in advanced manufacturing.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, David. So as we embark in the discussion, I would now like to ask a few of the participants to define your understanding of artificial intelligence. Maybe David and Oratile.
Yeah, let me start. I think that the simplest definition of artificial intelligence is the ability of a computer program or a machine to think and learn like a human. But I would like to somehow highlight from the beginning of the panel that I think there's a kind of a two types of visions that we can have in regards to artificial intelligence. The one that we see in the movies, right? The 80s movie from the Terminator, right? The AI will take over everything and will try to control everything. And the real AI that we're starting to experience in the shop floors, which is an AI that works together with humans. Of course, there's a part of the AI that completely automates certain repetitive tasks. But so far, what we have seen in research is that the best results out of AI are those that are actually assisting and augmenting and interacting with humans at the show floor to help them to solve problems, right? So I think that even though, yes, there's out there this apocalyptic vision of what is AI and what could AI could be, the reality that we're seeing is that the AI can actually be a useful tool to help us to solve problems, such as nowadays we're seeing with COVID pandemic.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. I think David gave a very good expansion of what AI is, and maybe just to look at it at a different angle, especially through the lens of manufacturing. I mean, one of the complex things that you want to be able to have a very strong handle on in a manufacturing facility is working capital. And part of the components of that is, for an example, a general manager in working capital in our manufacturing facilities, that you want to be able to buy, for an example, stock at the right time, because costs are a very sensitive issue when it comes to manufacturing facilities. Then the question is, when are you supposed to buy input materials? You literally can use, for an example, AI to look at vast amount of data, like certain market indices. If, for an example, producing components that are made of steel, you can look at your AI, which can make decisions on its own, can look at various commodities that are related to steel, can look at certain market indices across the globe, and really tell you what would be the best time to buy that at the lowest price. So those are kind of complex manufacturing facilities from business side, things that we could not necessarily have a very strong handle on in previous times. But because of AI, which thinks like a human in terms of thought processes, reasoning, and based on those processes and reasoning, then you can act humanly and rationally, and then enhance the output of saying, you are now ready, for an example, to buy this specific product because this is what the market indices are indicating. So I think, in short, it's any form of intelligence outside the realm of human and animals into machines. Because humans and animals, they have what you call a natural learning. Anything outside of that is intelligent, I consider it AI. And thank you, Vivian.
Thank you, Matile. We've now looked at some of the kind of the definitions to define the scope, but how about some practical examples of how AI has impacted on manufacturing? And it will be interesting to hear the comments from the software vendors. Let's maybe start with Eric from Oracle.
Yeah, so that's very interesting, because the way we are seeing the AI at Oracle is really about how we want to use it and how we want our customers to use the artificial intelligence, and not so much the definition of itself of the artificial intelligence. And we say that we usually categorize the AI into three different big categories. One, which is the AI that you want to build by yourself. So you have a very specific problem and you need to build an AI to fix this problem and to use some specific algorithm to do that. And that's one type of AI. But you have two other type of AI, another one which is clearly hidden, that you don't know that it's there. and it's in the background, and you are using it. It's exactly that you are using in Netflix when you have some recommendation about your movies, but in the manufacturing, you have exactly the same when you are using a robot, for instance. And for instance, Mitsubishi robot is able to readjust the position of the arm automatically based on the external temperature. That's something which is fully automated, and you don't have to take care about that. And you are using it like it is. And you don't even know that it is there, by the way. And then you have a third one, which is the AI tool. So you don't have to be a data scientist. It's exactly as Alexa. You don't have to be a data scientist to use Alexa. But at the end, you know that it's behind Alexa, there is an AI that is used to improve your business, to improve what you have to do, and to help you to take decision and to be potentially much more productive as well in your day-to-day job. And that's for me, the third big part of AI, where we are focusing a lot of activities, and that you mentioned, Oratil, is in the business application, for instance, where to find the best suppliers, how to optimize the cost, how to identify where you have some quality issue in manufacturing activities. So that's this type of AI. And that's, for me, this is a place where we are starting to see the big progress of usage of AI right now, because this part is something which is much more industrialized, because this is a tool. So we are now embedding that in the business activities and in the day-to-day activities. And as it is embedded in the day-to-day activities and not requiring specific data scientist knowledge, that's where you can scale that across the different activities in the organization and really get a lot of productivity across your organizations. And for me, this is a very important point of the AI.
Thank you very much. Mike, would you like to maybe add to that in terms of examples?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you did a very good job of explaining, how AI can, if we think about AI, how it can affect our software and what we can deliver to our customers. But I think there's three things driving the need for AI. First of all, that's big data, that's speed, and a level of automation we're seeing in manufacturing. We've been collecting a lot of data, big data in manufacturing. Now the rest of the world is catching up with manufacturing, which makes it kind of, we're the cool kids again. So, but, a lot of that data went unused. So our customers today, you connect to the equipment, you collect data, analyze it, in about 150 milliseconds, you need to tell that machine to go or no go or what to do next. And so there's this drive for speed of collecting the data, analyze it in that time frame. And most of our customers are saying, fast enough, I need in 50 milliseconds. Cisco, thank you for helping us get down to the edge and, and deliver that type of speed. So I think that decision making that artificial intelligence can bring, and I'll give you an example. We have a customer who's using visual inspection. They're learning from the human what the nonconformance is on a painted unit, right? Whether it's a car door or a panel that goes on a piece of equipment. But that camera, that visual camera can inspect so much more data points than the human eye, and it can find nonconformances. I like the way Eric put it, that we haven't thought about yet, right? So the drive for quality, the drive for that speed, and that drive to make the right decision at the point of work at the right time is really driving, I think, the big value of what we're seeing from artificial intelligence. And yes, I agree, it starts with the human. I see customers that have cobots working next to a human, and that cobot's mimicking what that human does. And what it does, it takes a lot of less stress off the worker. So you have the health factor and the safety factor, and especially with COVID-19, how we bring our employees back into the factories and keep them safe. That level of automation and intelligence that we're putting in the equipment is really driving, to me, new innovations that we're seeing from manufacturers across the board. Our job, both Oracle and SAP, is not to tell our customers you have a non-conformance escape, but they tell you you're trending that way, and make sure that our customers do not deliver defective components or product out to the market. And I think artificial intelligence is giving us the ability to really deliver on that requirement from our customers. So yeah, it's that decision making, the speed is what I'm seeing is really our customers are using AI to improve their operations.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Deirdre, from your perspective, you one of the local people.
I certainly am. And you know, I think everyone has put a really good spin on a lot of the conversation around AI. You know, everyone's brought a lot of the relevant points across. But I think, you know, what's really interesting for me is just the journey that we've seen. So even in your beginning, you know, Björn, you talked about the fact of Industry 4.0 and the hype around it coming. But I think part of that journey was, you know, realizing that machines and sharing of data from machines to people can be accelerated. And so part of that, you know, then comes back to the mic conversation where you suddenly got big data. When you're getting data from machines continuously, for example, that's creating an enormous amount of data. And a natural human, yes, ultimately could make some sense out of it, but not quick enough. And so what artificial intelligence in that context then really allows us to do is to take that big data, eliminate what we like to call noise, irrelevant information, because it is giving us a lot of that as well. And then really from that context, just allowing us to very quickly get an answer, get a result, and adjust. And in some cases, we're adjusting automatically, but in other cases, we're adjusting then with people. Because what we then are able to do out of that is provide notifications, give people insight, allow people to have a quick understanding of what's going on so that we can react quickly. And I think this in any production environment starts to become quite important. When you know straight away when something's happening and you can correct and rectify right there and then, you're already going to see cost saving coming into the business because it's not something you're dealing with down the line that you're going to try rework and recorrect. So these are the sorts of applications where definitely I think, you know, a lot of the touch points where everyone has talked about really does start to add value. But I do kind of want to support Mike on his conversation as well, is that once we started to explore what we can do with that data and machinery information and everything along those lines, I think the bigger application of AI into business in every context really starts to become how can it make us better decision makers? How can it give us quicker information so that when we are making business decisions, we're making it with more confidence, we're making it with more qualified information and data and accuracy, and in some cases, even predictability. And I think that starts to become quite important for the business as well, because as much as humans, you know, we are very smart and there are some very smart individuals in this world, AI just allows us to get to that point and that decision point so much faster that we are able to confidently make those decisions as well, which I think is quite exciting.
I'd like to say one thing. The big point I think you just made, Deirdre, is when you bring business context to data coming from the automation from the equipment, then you know the impact in sub-second response time to what that transaction on the shop floor means to your business. Yeah. You know, sometimes we stay in our little silo of just the shop floor, but let's bring the cost, the delivery to the customer, you know, your suppliers, all that into it in real time. That's where artificial intelligence starts. Deirdre, what you were talking about is driving out costs and efficiencies and stuff. Bringing business context down to the shop floor is, I think, is where you're going to get the biggest value of AI.
Agreed.
That's very interesting. Yeah. So we've discussed the journey of AI and how it was applied. Then for us in March, we had a serious lockdown in South Africa due to COVID. We had this global pandemic. So how do you think, to what extent have you experienced COVID either accelerating the uptake or the diffusion of AI or not? I'm interested maybe in an American and Mexico and South African view on that, and Europe. Sorry, Eric. Just to give us a sense of really how, to what extent was COVID a catalyst, or I'm not sure who wants to go first.
I can go first if need be.
Yeah.
So I think in our context as Sasol, I believe it should be true for other manufacturers as well. So one of the things that we realized quickly in the COVID era was the challenge of cash flow, because what you realize is that your customers were not necessarily now paying you in time. Some of the customers starting to pay you earlier. Some of them were changing the rate at which they pay you. And then we had to look to AI because cash flow is very, very important in the manufacturing facility, because if you don't have cash, it simply means you need to go borrow money from the banks, and then you need to pay interest fees on that. But if you can be able to have a machine learning program of which we develop through the lens of machine learning AI, machine learning within the context of AI, we looked at various customer behaviors in a form of data, and then we were able to some degree calculate the customer propensity to pay, which is a very, very difficult thing to calculate if you don't have a deep learning algorithms. And once you are able to calculate that, then we can be able to pin with high level of accuracy when your receivables are going to come. And then those receivables prevent you from going to the bank to borrow money in order to support your operations. So in our sense, COVID forced us. So it was not necessarily our choice to now look for, deep AI solutions. It was like, this is the context. What do we do? And we do believe some of these impacts of COVID will remain with us for a very long time. And that's how, in our context, I think AI came to our rescue. So I think, in short, I think AI really is accelerating the entire digitalization space of which AI is part.
Thank you very much. That's fascinating. Direct business impact. Yeah. David?
So let me follow up on that, right? I think AI, it's really creating a lot of opportunities to mitigate the impact that we're seeing due to COVID pandemic. We have the traditional digital transformation, but of course now we have this boosted AI-enabled digital transformation. I think that the main added value that it's creating is the opportunity to address many of the product lifecycle issues and supply chain issues that we are now facing. And when we adopt AI-enabled technologies, right, we create more smartness into our traditional technologies that we use to conduct production management and supply chain management. This results in an increase of, first of all, connectivity, transparency, visibility, and as always, our final aim is to be able to predict things. So in this way, we can increase their activity. And I think that the big term that is going to be mentioned a lot during the upcoming year is the resiliency of our production lines and our supply networks around the world. And around that, we will see how factories will try to become smarter by using digital twins. We're going to try to get more resilience when it comes to predictive maintenance, and all these new capabilities that we're going to be enhancing and making smarter. Once again, in our production lines, in our supply chains, will allow us to be more agile, more flexible, and at the end, more resilient to face similar situations. But even though now it has been COVID what has accelerated the need for digital transformation and building new capabilities in our production lines and global supply chains, I think this was something that sooner or later was going to be needed, right? We need to have more agile, more flexible, more resilient, more sustainable production lines and supply chains if we want a better world for our society in the near future.
You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Eric, would you like to go next?
Yeah, we've seen four accelerator effect in the COVID. One is interest for using AI for new generation of automation or improvement of the factory activities. For instance, having some new machines that are using AI to automate differently the activity in the shop floor even it's not yet done, by the way, because it takes some time. So as soon as you are introducing a new machine, it's of course taking time. So it's not a short-term changement. But at the end, we've seen a lot of interest of investigating more those kind of topics. The second big topic is, as you mentioned, Mike and Deirdre, is data management. Everybody has data everywhere, and they've seen that during the COVID-19 that there are a huge amount of data and they don't know what to do with that. And they know that there are some great stuff to pick up from those data and to extract from those data to do their business better and to find some gold nuggets, by the way, in the data and think differently and find some innovation stuff to do. So we've seen a lot of interest of using AI to manipulate the data, extract some insight from the data and get some recommendation from the data. So same, it's not immediately in place, but it's one of the trend. And the two other ones that are immediately apply is the one that you mentioned, Ratil, is clearly using the AI to do forecast and to do prediction, to forecast on the business plan, forecast on the supply chain, forecast on the production activity. So many type of forecast everywhere, but there is clearly a topic of simulation and forecast and using the AI for simulation and forecast. This is the third one. And the fourth one is managing complex situation as well. And we've seen that in the supply chain, mainly in the supply chain, but not only, also in the service side or on the customer relationship side, because we've seen all the seasonality of demand that have been changed in the last months with all the lockdown everywhere.
Manufacturing is known for
so everybody has to completely change the demand forecasting and reorganize completely the value chain, not just supply chain, the value chain from customer to delivery. And that's a very complex problem. And for that, people had to really use AI to do that and apply new AI capabilities. And also it has been emphasized by the fact that most of the people are now working remotely. And because they are working remotely, they need to collaborate with the others without being in the same room. So that's create distanciation between the people. And this distanciation is not really helping to fix the problem, to fix the situation. So using the AI to get recommendation and to have better discussion, better high-level discussion with their colleagues, it's also a great tool. And we have one big customer that is based in Dubai, who is doing a plastic manufacturers, who really did this transformation using AI and cloud before the start of the COVID-19. So they changed their system almost 1.5 years ago. And when they were in lockdown, they had no disruption in their activities. So they were able to place everybody in remote working and being able to work at the same way that they did in the past and fix the very complex problem that they had without being in the office. And that's really, for me, this is really the big shift that we have in the usage of AI right now. It's to be able, it's demonstrate that the company that are using it are much more resilient right now to manage complex situations, which is the case of the COVID-19, to be honest.
Sorry, I keep forgetting. Mike, do you have any inputs on how has COVID accelerated the use, the diffusion of AI technologies?
Whilst you rejoined, would you like me to let me add a bit on that as well? So I think, all the points are quite valid as to, COVID has obviously brought a lot of focus around digital transformation, and in doing so, automation topics. And then we start to realize that in order to automate and digitize, what we've really got to then also do is have action points and decision-making around them. I think AI then naturally fills in that space. But I think the other thing I just wanted to bring to the fore as well is, often when we think AI, and a lot of people still think in the form of a robot or a flying car, and, what we've been taught from movies. I think, what we sometimes also forget is that, I think Eric mentioned to it earlier, it's an unseen thing. And so what we've also seen is a big need across businesses to self-service. And when we start to talk about self-service, it's self-servicing customers, it's self-servicing sales teams, it's self-servicing management teams. And we've really then seen an encouragement and an increase in the adoption of The other little tool sets that we have around AI, when we start to talk our virtual robotics, our digital assistants, our chatbots, and a lot of application of those starting to come in as well, to really just help business extend and give that collaboration point that Eric alluded to earlier on as well, where, we now are able to bring people together through technology more seamlessly, but yet still giving them business insight on what's happening through tool sets like bots, which are based off of AI platforms as well.
Oh, thank you. That's very interesting. Mike, any view from the SAP and your experience in the America?
Absolutely. The day doesn't go by we don't have these conversations with customers, right? And I think it's the two things is agility and speed. Look, COVID-19 was accelerated a lot of investment in innovation. We started with Brexit, right? Nobody really saw that coming, and it happened. Then we had the trade wars, and that kind of put a lot of pressure on the supply chains that were single threaded. Then here comes COVID-19, which is just a whole new level come in. So your business is changing at a speed right now that you've never seen, right? It's unprecedented. Conversation. I'm a food manufacturer. Before COVID-19, 80% of my business was bulk. I sold to restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
In less than 30 days, 45 days, my business changed to 70% of it was consumer retail. Smaller packaging, smaller, lot sizes, the speed at which I had to change my processes. That doesn't mean you could get everybody trained in time. When you have artificial intelligence and you have that level of automation, you can change faster. So it's not about capacity and running. It's about agility and be able to change, on a dime. COVID-19 is, our customers learned two things. They learned what they do well, and where they had challenges. And so we have a new area of focusing on those challenges. And AI is helping us identify the right areas with the biggest impact on our business and where we should make those investments for the future. Because I don't think any of us believe trade wars are going away. And I don't believe any of us believe that COVID-19 is just the first, pandemic that could affect our business. And we have to be prepared. And that's what our customers are asking is, how do we prepare for future unseen business disruptions? And I think that's the solution, or the end-to-end business problem we have to solve.
Yeah. Am I correct in saying that it seems like COVID finally embedded the use of AI? Is that a truthful statement, or is it still in the early adopters?
I think if we look at it through the lens of South Africa, I would say it has in some sectors and not necessarily in others. I think in South Africa there's a gap between ambitions and actions. So we're very ambitious in terms of we want AI, and then we need to get going with it. I think what a lot of organizations or sectors are really scared of is the failure that comes with that. And we know, as part of working in an agile space, in a technology space, innovation space, you have to embrace failures. Because we talk about AI now as something that is perfect and easy, but AI is part of innovation. And with that, you need to fail fast, learn, and some of those failures, if you integrate them back into your processes, it becomes very difficult for your competitors to learn them. And that's a sign of success in the long term. So in short, it has to those who are not necessarily scared of failing, who are doers. Because I think, and I really want to emphasize this, in South Africa we have a lot of ambition, but we don't really support those ambitions with actions, and hence the gap between the embedment of AI and the results thereof. So I think it's a two-way thing.
Thank you very much, Oratile.
And I think
sorry.
There is a very big difference between large group, big companies, and SMBs. So that's where I think that there is a huge difference. For the large group, they are working on the AI not for a while, but for many years right now, and they already looked about how they can use that in their day-to-day business. So even if it's not perfect, I would not say that they are early adopters right now. I think that they have some level of maturity on using some part of AI, not everything, but some part of AI. For the SMBs, it's much more difficult because for the SMBs, they have two big problems. First is the investment and the skill set for the AI. And secondly, the volume of data that they have as well, because they don't have a huge volume of data and they are not generating a huge volume of data for a while. So they are starting from a very small vision of their business and capability to analyze their situation. And that's where one part of the AI which is very important as well, is how to apply the AI on a small set of data and not only huge, large set of data. That we know that it works, but on a small set of data, if you want to look about your suppliers, how you can use the AI on selecting the right suppliers or identifying the suppliers which is currently failing and reacting from that, or even predicting that very quickly without having 5 years of data that you can analyze in your day for your business. And this is for me the big challenge. Because Industry 4.0 and the resilience of the manufacturing activities is coming from most of the country for the SMBs. This is where we have the most largest portfolio of manufacturing companies. So for me, the challenge is really there.
And one point on that is, I think everybody believes large enterprises can innovate like this, right? And take advantage of AI and a lot of the investment. But I do agree, it's the small to medium companies that we're going to see the biggest growth coming in. Yes, it's a challenge, but I think they have to have this intelligence to better predict their demand signal and planning, and then move it throughout the whole organization and enterprise. So although it starts at the large, and I think we're down that path, I believe you're going to see a lot of the big investment at the smaller players because they have to keep up. And when you have something like COVID-19, they get hit the hardest. So investing to be more predictive and to protect their investment, I think you're going to see a growth in that area.
Yeah. Deirdre, your inputs?
I was just going to say to that, I think both on Eric and Mike's comments as well, is that, for us, what we've seen COVID introduce is pre-COVID, people were conscious of AI, but again, very much leaving it up to the enterprises to do the investment and do the hard work and learn the lessons. But I think what COVID has really done is it's prioritized the need for people to understand it more, and really for people to start exploring the value that AI is going to bring and the value that AI can bring to businesses at even an SMB level. And I think because of that, a lot of businesses didn't even realize that vendors like ourselves at Cisco or Oracle or SAP, these are now inherent tools in business applications. It's not something that you have to now, sideline and try and bring in and get working. It's actually just become natural capabilities too. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more adoption in that space as the awareness, I think, has become a lot more heightened and people are a lot more aware of what those capabilities are.
I wanted to talk about the analogy on product lifecycle management, these large systems where you co-design and you have digital twins. That kind of forces compliance down the supply chain. Is there a similar trend in AI if you talk big corporations and lower tier down SMEs? Or is it, I'm just interested in that analogy.
Look, and maybe just in short, so we're experiencing, okay, let me start this way. One of the complexities in the world of today is that you don't only have to produce high quality product. So you must produce that product, send it to the right customer at the right time, at the right place. And whether you are a big organization or small organizations, because you are selling products not only in local cities or country, you're selling across the globe. So even big organizations at this stage are actually forced to be agile, enterprising organizations. So what that means, it can mean different things to different organizations, but what that really means is that you've got to be able to integrate across your entire value chain. What you produce must go through different channels in the organization, supply chain, distribution channels, your salespeople. And underlying to that, is AI. So I think we get into a point whereby at some point in time, in a couple of years to come, there wouldn't necessarily be, if we all do business in the right way, there wouldn't necessarily be a massive distinctions between small and big companies. Because there's no room for elephants now. There's no room for Titanic companies that takes 10 years to 10. Strategies are 2 to 3 year strategies. You change it in 2 to 3 years. You don't have 20-year strategy because in 5 years, that strategy is obsolete. So you gotta be able to respond to things, whether you are big or small, quickly and in a very nimble way. So I think that's, maybe let me give others opportunities to also add in that discussion to get their perspective.
Yeah, it was just for me interesting from my kind of roots.
Yeah.
But if we then talk about large and small firms and big and small data sets, and we talk about this kind of digital trajectory, how do small companies, listening to this conversation on AI, how do you get into that? How do you know about the value for you? How do you test that case? Is there maybe some guidance from the panel members on that?
Well, I think,
yeah, please go ahead, Mike.
Please. Go ahead, David.
No, I think I was going to yeah, please, Mike, sorry. You have a little bit of delay. No, please go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just, while I'm up, I was just going to make the comment, is that it's not about evaluating, it's about solving business problems. And I think Deidre said it correctly. AI is not something you buy and add in. We're putting AI into our applications. So regardless of the size company, they can take advantage of that benefit. And the movement to the cloud is going to make that technology and that innovation available to all companies, because it's really bringing that cost point down. And that's what I was going to say. And what we just described was really the digital thread from cradle to grave throughout the whole life cycle. And I think AI maybe has been siloed, but as you start going down and you're putting AI throughout how you plan, how you design, how you manufacture, how you deliver, how you maintain assets, from design to operate, that standpoint, and you have intelligence across the whole enterprise back into financial suppliers and the customer data, that's where you're going to really drive that change. And I think that's when you'll see AI really become more prevalent. But Deidre's right. We're putting it in our applications. We the applications providers to make it available to all customers. And there's some enablers out there. I'm sorry, David, please.
No. Just following up what you're saying, right? It's not the technology for the sake of the technology, right? It's really about looking how you can digitally enable, how you can AI enable your business processes, how you can reinvent them and make them more more competitive, more resilient, more agile. Once again, thanks to technology. So I think that, as you were mentioning, right, sooner or later, that technology will become more affordable. We're seeing like a cloud technology trying to reduce the cost of access to computing powers, to storage, which was really expensive for SMEs in the past. And now cloud is allowing to, SMEs to get access to this computing infrastructure that they need as one of the requirements to start storing data, to quickly process data and use that data to support their decision making, their action taking. So I think for SMEs, what is very important to do at this point is perhaps you cannot buy it immediately, perhaps you cannot have access immediately, but you need to start rethinking your business processes to start, having advantage of these technologies. And when the financial capital is there, when the business case is clear for you to add on this technology to your business processes, then you will get a competitive advantage. But of course, everything, for me at least, it starts by re-engineering your business processes to take advantage of technology, not just buying the technology and later on trying to figure out how to use them in your operations.
I think
Yes.
that there are two things. One, which is what Mike and David said, is that the AI which is embedded in the applications, and that's really helped the company, whatever the size of the company, really to improve their business and to manage their problem in an holistic way. Because the purpose of the AI is to break the silos across the different part of activity. So you need to connect the demand with the supply chain, with the production activity, with your cost, with your financial forecast, and you need to manage that in a holistic way. And the AI is really very helpful for that. And it's very helpful as well, potentially, to connect the large group with the small company as well, because there is a huge interconnection in every industry, by the way, automotive and the other one. There are huge interconnection between the large group and the small companies. And when you are detecting very quickly that suppliers can be in trouble, then as a large group, you can identify them, predict that they will be in trouble, and then help them in advance and react in advance, instead waiting to have some issue in your ecosystem and reacting too late on that. So that's one part of for me, of the AI. The other part is really the AI technology as well. So for instance, high performance computing, the HPC, is something which is now affordable for the SMBs. And it's not just this question of AI. In this case, it's much more a question of cloud. Having the AI available in the cloud at a low cost right now can really bring those kind of high-level technology and very performant technology that was only accessible and affordable for a large group to the SMBs right now. If you want to have if a small company want to simulate the definition of a new product and modelize fluid flows in the product, they can do that in an HPC in few hours or maybe a week as a low cost. Why they don't have to buy a specific HPC environment for doing that. So that's really also the evolution of the cloud and AI as well, is providing some very high performance technology to a small company at a cheap price. Yeah.
Thank you. Deirdre, would you like to add?
Well, so I think I did give my points to that, but yeah, I think it's just it is about the biggest challenge is taking that tool set, applying the right business use case, and this is the challenge we've had with digital transformation, and it's the challenge we face from time to time with artificial intelligence as well. Is that there's almost this, oh, I've got the tool, it will just work. And the reality is it's not. Every business has a different pain. Every business has a different nuance. Every business has a different uniqueness. And it's really about business embracing those and saying, okay, well, I've got the tool, but where do I really need to use it? Where's the application for it? And that's really where the critical factor comes in.
Okay, thank you. I want to now move on to kind of the last three questions, coming down to a developing country. Here, the limitations of AI for application or use in developing countries, or are there specific aspects to be considered? Then obviously the related question is technology versus jobs. Do we see a huge impact on employment via the use of AI? So maybe can I have would you like to comment on whether you've had any specific noteworthy experiences in implementing in developing countries, and also the jobs aspect? David?
I can do it.
Please go, Ratile.
Yeah, I think if we look at in a generic terms, and then maybe I'll come to an example. If you look at developing countries, we really see, and let's take South Africa as an example, we really see two ends of the continuum, which are opposing in nature. One is you need to be internationally competitive, and for you to be able to do that, you need to be aggressive, technology, because you're pushing efficiencies up. On the other side of the continuum is pre-COVID, for an example, in South Africa. I think we had about between 7 to 11 million people that were still in Industry 2. And what we're talking about now is Industry 4.0. And these millions of people have not experienced this 4.0. So you have to be quite context specific on how aggressive and your policy sets up in terms of how you want to drive forward with AI. Because if you don't consider all this context of job impacts, I mean, for an example, AI will generate new jobs that requires different skills. And then the question becomes, do you have enough educational setup to support that? In the context of South Africa, the context of youth, the answer is not necessarily yes. So you really have to find the answer between these two ends of the continuum to make sure you're quite prudent on what you're going to do. So one of the things that we did, for an example, in Sasol, when we were building some of the complex power generating plants, is some of these technologies you can get overseas, which have AI embedded in it. But then the question then becomes, how do you maintain them? So then you choose to use local structures to maintain this, and then use your international bodies to transfer the maintenance skills in the local bodies. Because some of these technologies, you can maintain them offshore. AI, in fact, allows you to maintain them remotely. But then that jeopardizes the other end of creating jobs. Because AI created new jobs, then you need to make sure you use your own local people to do those jobs and not fall into a trap of going fully AI, because then the very same people who do not employ can come and destroy what you're building if you don't really take context into account. So in my view, it's about being prudent, understanding the context in which you operate, and making sure you extract the right value where humans necessarily cannot extract value, and really complement that, human-machine collaboration in a progressive way.
Oh, very interesting. Thank you, Ratili.
Yeah, I think it's a typical question that always rises when we're discussing about AI, right? I mean, despite its potential benefits, there are still a lot of concerns about, job loss risk, security, privacy, legal compliance and laws, and many other issues that we're still trying to understand more about the responsible use of AI. Many times what we have seen, even looking back into past industrial revolutions, of course, there's some short-run technical innovations that tend to displace workers from certain tasks, but at the same time, as was mentioned, it creates later on some new jobs. So I think that what we have to do at this point is to responsibly manage the transition. And also coming back to what I was saying at the beginning, so far also in relation to AI, what we have seen is that the best financial and performance output of using AI, it's not just, replacing the human. I think there are different scenarios where AI decides and implements, which is, a situation where AI is fully working as an autonomous system. But we have other scenarios where AI decides and human implements, AI recommends, human decides, AI generates insights, and human incorporates these insights into the decision process. Or, as we see nowadays with our specialists in AI, right? Human generates the AI, and then AI just simply evaluates, executes itself. So we are seeing that AI, yes, in some cases, it's removing humans from certain activities, right? That really don't require that human touch. But at least in the 5, let's say, possible interactions that humans can have with AI, I only mentioned one where AI is working alone, right? As an autonomous system. So I think we need still to understand more. But I mean, I would say that the big challenge that we have is that rather than fearing, AI and the potential of AI, what we need to do is to try to understand it better, right? And the more we understand it in terms of socially and economically responsible usage, I think we'll have smarter factories and, of course, a smarter workforce.
I just, for what Professor Romero was stating, look, the role of the worker is going to change, with more automation and more intelligence. And we get together once a year at an event called the World Manufacturing Forum. And what I love about this event, they bring the governments together with academia, with business. And if you really want to make sure the workers are keeping up with the innovation, we got to change our universities. And, Professor Romero and I've had a lot of conversations about this. University has to change with the times of the workers, right? Governments must help enable these universities and companies to innovate. And, we, the companies, need to be feeding these universities and these municipalities, hey, this is the innovation and where technology is going from business applications. And if you bring those three together, it's taking this impact of artificial intelligence and the smarter worker and actually making it a amplifier or an accelerator for smarter workers, for different curriculums at universities, and for governments investing in the right areas. So, those are kind of the three pillars here of having artificial intelligence built into what the work of the future is going to look like. And I think you have to have all three come together to make sure that we minimize the impact on the worker, but are delivering the worker of the future based on innovation and applications that businesses are providing. And, Professor Romero in his university I've spoken down there, they do a tremendous job of preparing the next generation of workers, not only in the factory, but in management. And I think that's key.
And I would say that somehow we are already looking a little bit into what this augmented operator could be, right? Collaborating with AI in our daily lives. Just look how your intelligent personal assistants in your mobile phone have helped you to become more productive, more efficient, right? Helping you to manage your schedule, reminding you about what you need to do when you need to do it, right? And just trying to translate this, how an intelligent personal assistant, right? A softbot could help a service technician to do better his or her job in the shop floor, right? By just guaranteeing that the machines will be always, running according to the needs of the production schedule. So AI is there, right? And if we use them properly, AI is here to help us to become better workers, better citizens in the smart factories and the smart cities of hopefully the near future. Eric, you want to say something? Sorry to interrupt.
That's great. No, you're completely right. I think it's really evolution of the AI, embedded AI, and the usage of the AI in your day-to-day job. I think it's really key for improvement of individual activities. But for us, I think that there are three types again of topics. So one is about the AI for the emerging countries, but not only is AI is using data, even if it's a small set of data or large set of data, but at the end, AI is using data. So that's true that there is a question of ownership of the data and also legal aspect of the data and protection of the data across the world in different countries and even in different companies as well. So that there is also one of the challenges of the AI that we are covering at Oracle is really to be able to deploy the AI capabilities everywhere. So it means in the cloud, everywhere in the world, but also if we are deploying our cloud in most of the every countries right now in the world to make sure that you can apply that locally in some specific countries, but also we are deploying the cloud AI capabilities, what we are calling at customer. So directly inside the customer scope, in the data center of the customers or in the structure of the customer to let the customer doing its own, applying the same type of AI capabilities, but on its own data, on its own environment. And that's very important because behind this, there is a question of ownership of the data and protection of the data. And that's one very key topic. The second key topic is for me is that a company is a collective intelligence. It's a mix of individual intelligence and global intelligence. And for me, the AI is really adding some new intelligence to this existing set of human intelligence. So it's not there to replace the people. And as you said there as well, 80%, or it's not 80%, but big part of the AI is giving recommendation to the people. It's helping people to do better their job, to be much more comfortable with their decision, and to take the best decision, and to help them to take the best decision. And it's not there to replace them. It's really there to help them to do better their job and to do differently their job and to grow their activity at the same time. So I think it's really not there to, it's really there to help the people. So it's not replacing people and killing jobs. And there is a small part of AI, which is growing to the time as well, which is much more automation. And in this automation part of the AI, I think that we have to think that exactly the same way we thought about the previous automation transformation with robotics and the other one. None of them really killed jobs. Even in the robotics one, we have some study right now from the European Commission, from most of the biggest economists in the world, that's shown that was not the robotics that killed jobs. The job that have been moved from specific regions to other regions, that was much more the outsourcing and the productivity and cost efficiency strategy, but not the robotics in itself. And every robotics transformation created some new job and created almost 1.5% of more job by integrating some robotics. So I think that with the AI, it will be exactly the same and even potentially bigger as well. I think that even the AI automation will create job, different type of job. Of course, we need to have some new skill set for using it, for working with that, but that will create job because it will help to be much more productive, to growth as well, because if we are doing that, it's to growth. So as soon as we are growing, we are hiring some new people and we are developing the business. So we are creating some new jobs. So I think that for me, there is no question about the AI which will kill jobs. It's a non-question for me.
Thank you very much, Eric. Deirdre, would you like to make the last input on this topic?
I'd love to, thanks. So I think just coming back to the emerging question as well, I think, what I love about emerging countries and new business in general is that they are not fearful. They know they've got to compete. They know they've got to grow quickly. They know they've got a big learning gap and experience to fill. So generally what we actually see, or what we've experienced in those spaces, is they're very open to adopting new technologies. And AI is definitely one of those. I think if anything, they're the ones that are going to really push AI to the limits because they want to push it. They want to leverage it as much as possible. So I think it's very prominent in those kinds of markets. And we'll see actually a lot coming out of them. With regards to the employee side of life, I don't think AI is necessarily going to completely replace jobs. I think there will be some impact in some jobs. But I think what we do see potentially happening is that businesses have to make a decision. Do they hire a new resource? Do they add extra headcount into the business? Or do they introduce AI and digital transformation and automation? So I think what we often see is, rather than losing headcount because of AI, we maybe see a loss in decision to add headcount. And that's quite different. But I think added to that, and everyone has talked to it, and I can only support that, when we do tend to go on these journeys, because generally what happens when you solve one problem or you improve one part of a business, focus shifts somewhere else. And so then what we end up seeing is that it actually then opens up new opportunities for new areas of employment and new jobs coming into the business. So I do think we'll see a good blend and balance as AI progresses, not about job loss or replacement, maybe just how jobs shift within the workspace.
Oh, fascinating. Thank you. So I think we've had the structured set of discussion. I just want to now, in closure, thank again Mr. Eric Prevost from Oracle for sponsoring this session, and then also invite each of you to just make a closing remark, bearing in mind South African audience, you have a different perspective that means a lot to us. So I'd like to hand over to each one for a short closing statement. Thanks.
Must I start again?
Yes.
I can go. So I think especially in the context of SMEs, because that's where the challenges seems to be, is that the best way to start is to be obsessed with what your customers are saying and what your customers are not saying. I mean, one of the things through this obsession, one of the things we stumbled on was that we discovered that some of our customers are discussing things with each other because they want to learn a lot more about our products. And with that, because that's not what they were saying to us, there's something that they were saying to each other, we gave them the platform with all of that information in a self-service way. And within a very short period of time, our sales were ticking up. So I think really being obsessed and putting the customers at the center can be a very strong catalyst in how you transform digitally.
Thank you, Ratile. Mike, would you like to go next?
Yeah, it's like with any technology or innovation, as long as we keep the focus on solving business problems, to help get to where our customers want to be in manufacturing in the next 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, and even 10 years, AI can be a big enabler of that. But we stay focused on solving business problems, not just deploying technology for the sake of technology. Then it's a win-win for everyone.
Thank you very much. Eric?
Yeah, I think that everybody's right. I think it's a question of business case and business activity, business growth. I think that's to come back on the obsessions and being obsessed by the customers. I like it. It's but not only by the customers, by suppliers and operation as well, and cost. So have to be obsessed by many topics at the same time. So that's really the big challenge of the company. And for me, the question of obsession right now is that people have to be obsessed to identify what are the tools that are using AI. And for me, this is really key, because if they have to select a tool today, they have to select a tool who is able to use the AI and to capture data from outside of their scope, to learn from the others, and to be much more efficient than they are right now. They have to jump to the new generation of being able to identify in a holistic way their ecosystem and their external environment. And they cannot stay in their bubble. And for me, this is really the big challenge of heavy companies. The world is changing so fast that they have no choice to be able to capture information from outside. And for that, there is no way to do that without using AI. No way. And for me, this is that should be their obsession. And this is something that we see in the customer obsession, because that's right. If you want to understand your customer, you need to know more about your customer, your profile, their intent, and everything about the customer. But that's external data. That's not only internal data, if you want to know that.
Thank you very much. David, Professor Romero?
I would talk about perhaps the workers, right? I think, automation, robotics, artificial intelligence have always shifted what professionals do rather than completely displace them. So I think that what we need to do nowadays is to focus on exploring the technology, on investing in continuously upskilling our workforce to take advantage of the new technologies, so we can create new competitive advantages of our people. But the technology, and I think our business processes, are going to be as good as our investment in our people. And I was there was mentioned, I think that's the key. I mean, we need to continuously focusing on people and provide people with the best tools available to do in the best possible way their jobs. And in this case, AI is one of those very important technologies. And perhaps just if people are more interested on reading about the discussion of manufacturing in the age of artificial intelligence, as Mike was mentioning, the 2020 World Manufacturing Forum report is focused on this. It's freely available at worldmanufacturingforum.com, so we can continue the conversation with you offline.
Thank you. That's a very good piece of advice. Deirdre, the last word over to you.
I think if any encouragement out to everyone, I know AI, I think sometimes what the fear around it is the cost or the dollar sign attached to it. And there's a saying that I do love, especially I think at this state that we're in the world, is that, yeah, there's a cost to change. We're not going to lie about that, but there's also a cost of what if we don't change? And that for me sometimes is more scarier. And so I just want to just put it out to everyone. Look at what your business needs. Look at what your customers are asking for. Look at the problems you're trying to solve. And then think about how AI potentially can enable it. And don't be scared to open that conversation. I think you'd be surprised what one can achieve by adopting it.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you, really. It's been very interesting, fascinating discussion, many dimensions and aspects to consider, and really unique insights. Maybe just in closure to ask for David, if you can put the link on the broadcast when we do that, then we can also
Sure.
share the World Manufacturing Forum's report.
World Manufacturing Forum.com, so it's quite easy, but yes, we'll make it available.
Yes. Thank you again to each. I think it was really personally much enjoyable, and it was great to meet everyone.